I started my full-fledged preparation after I joined the ultimate assessment program at Civilsdaily.
Civilsdaily.
There is a 12-month strategy which I have done on Civilsdaily platform only.
I reached out to the Civilsdaily team.
Civilsdaily.
Current affairs में Civilsdaily.
Civilsdaily with Civilsdaily.
Civilsdaily.
A mentorship program of Civilsdaily, and that did help me a lot.
Namaste. Today we are going to discuss ethical dilemmas in the context of ethics case studies. Before we jump in, I would like to inform you that our Smash Mains program is now live. It is the only mains program that creates a massive competitive advantage for you. आपके जो भी gaps हैं, आपको जो भी figuring out करनी है, all that becomes our headache. All you need to do is implement our suggestions and get from level 0 to level 1 and then to ranker level. So do check out the program, do check out the brochure. Now let's get back to our topic. Ethics case studies is something that majority of you are going to struggle with. They are very lengthy in nature, and even the best of the best find it very difficult to complete them on time. 2 to 3 case studies उनको skip करने ही पड़ रहे हैं. The solution to this problem is to be prepared with templates. आपका solid command होना चाहिए ethical dilemmas में all the stakeholders पे, and you should have a solid approach. That's what we are going to discuss. इससे you can save up to 2 to 3 minutes on every case study. Right? Let's jump in. First dilemma is sustainability, environmental protection, displaced people's rights versus economic development, economic gains. ये scenario सबको पता है, right? Now, the important point that I wanted to tell you here was, you can't go and memorize a list of 100 ethical dilemmas, a vanilla list of 100 ethical dilemmas. It is impossible कि आप वहां से कुछ भी recall कर पाएंगे, right? That's not the right framework. आपके पास time crunch वैसे ही है. How will you be able to recall anything if you have just memorized vanilla lists? Instead of ethical dilemmas, our approach will be to go scenario wise, right? Scenario 1, scenario 2, scenario 3. This way we'll cover 20 scenarios and extensively cover the dilemmas associated with these scenarios, right? So the first scenario here is sustainability versus economic development. बहुत questions आए हुए हैं इसके अराउंड, ठीक है? Rehabilitation of Adivasis displaced by large projects. Second, industry is using a lot of water and farmers का livelihood plus water conservation का issue हो रहा है, right? Third, you have, latest technologies like generative AI, batteries. They have an environment footprint. So all these case studies correspond to one scenario where the primary dilemma is sustainability cross economic development, right? अब यहां पे आपको 3 बातें ध्यान में रखनी है, राइट? क्या है वो? फर्स्ट, you have to identify the protagonist. And the primary dilemma that the protagonist faces. Right? इसका मतलब क्या है? आपके सबसे ज्यादा मार्क्स आप जो प्राइमरी डिलेमा आइडेंटिफाई करेंगे, जो आप फर्स्ट डिलेमा लिखेंगे, उसके हैं. That communicates to the examiner that you have understood this case study, right? अब आप देखिए, एक सिनेरियो में बहुत सारे डिलेमास होते हैं, आपको लिखने भी पड़ेंगे बहुत सारे डिलेमास. वो बोलता ही है कि आइडेंटिफाई ऑल द डिलेमास इन्वॉल्व्ड, राइट? सो यू आर गोइंग टू राइट 5 to 6 डिलेमास, probably more. The importance of the first primary dilemma is up there. जो भी आपके पास सिनेरियो है, ठीक है, उसमें लॉन्ग टर्म में भी कुछ इश्यूज हो रहे होंगे, सोसाइटी के लिए सही एग्जाम्पल नहीं सेट हो रहा होगा. All those different dilemmas also exist. But your focus has to be on the primary dilemma. It is very contextual and very specific to the scenario that is given to you. What's the second point here? You have to use the most appropriate terms from the left-hand side and the right-hand side to identify the dilemma. What do I mean by that? जैसे अब आपका environment plus आदिवासीज plus, you know, a lot of other rehabilitation activities are happening. तो आप sustainability का term use कर सकते हैं यहाँ पे. Use sustainability and use economic development here. अगर सिर्फ environment की बात हो रही है या फिर let's say pollution related कुछ हो रहा है, then you can use environment protection. You don't need to use sustainability as such. If explicitly people are not involved, 3-4 और फैक्टर्स नहीं आए हैं, राइट? सो डिपेंडिंग ऑन द ग्रेविटी ऑफ द सिचुएशन, ऑन द स्केल ऑफ द प्रॉब्लम, यू हैव टू यूज द अप्रोप्रिएट टर्म, राइट? सिमिलरली राइट हैंड साइड में इकोनॉमिक डेवलपमेंट की बात हम तब करेंगे जब इकोनॉमिक डेवलपमेंट रिलेटेड हो. इफ इट्स अबाउट इंडस्ट्रीज एंड प्रॉफिट्स, यू विल यूज इकोनॉमिक गेन्स, नॉट इकोनॉमिक डेवलपमेंट, राइट? द थर्ड इंपॉर्टेंट पॉइंट हियर बिकम्स दैट इन्हीं में से ही आपके सेकेंडरी डिलेमास भी बन के आ सकते हैं, राइट? सेकेंडरी डिलेमास कैन बी फ्रॉम द सेम सिनेरियो का डिलेमा और फ्रॉम द अदर सिनेरियोज एज वेल, राइट? These dilemmas are not 100% airtight. You have to try to be precise. That's the main funda here, right? So there are these 3 principles that you need to take care of. First, protagonist और उसका primary dilemma. Second, be very specific about the terms that you are using, right? And third, everything that you are not using becomes sort of your secondary dilemma, right? Now let's look at the next scenario that we have. National security / legal duty versus humanitarian concerns. ये भी scenario हमने देखा है बहुत बार play out करते हुए, right? इसके PYQs list करते हैं. सबसे पहला, this one we have discussed with Sumit in our last session, right? There's an SP who is caught up between left-wing extremists, जिनको इन्हें पकड़ना है, but the left-wing extremists are guarded by women of the village, right? So अब SP क्या करे? क्या वो women पे लाठी चार्ज करे? What should the SP be doing, right? Second, anything related to radicalization. Right. So in this scenario also, if the gravity of the situation, if the scale of the problem is at the level of national security, तो आप national security use करिएगा. नहीं तो legal duty is a good enough term, right? There's another term that fits here. It's law enforcement. Right? इनमें से जो टर्म बिल्कुल अप्रोप्रिएटली इस सिचुएशन को डिस्क्राइब कर रहा होगा, आपको वो यूज करना है, राइट? लेट्स कम टू द थर्ड सिनेरियो, प्रोसीजरल कंप्लायंस वर्सेस कंपैशन. दिस साउंड्स सिमिलर टू scenario 2, but the magnitude and the gravity here is one level below scenario 2, right? Let's see from PYQs. Procedural compliance के PYQs हैं. 1, bank manager using dormant account funds for a colleague's father's surgery. So bank manager using dormant account funds for colleagues father surgery. Very interesting case study, right? बैंक मैनेजर है, उनके कलीग उनसे हेल्प मांगने आई है कि फादर एडमिट हैं, उनकी सर्जरी होनी है, एंड बैंक मैनेजर हैज द ऑप्शन ऑफ रिलीजिंग फंड्स दैट आर लाइंग डॉर्मेंट, राइट? उनको कोई क्लेम करने नहीं आया है, ही हैज दैट डिस्क्रेशनरी पावर एज वेल, एंड आई थिंक हियर in this scenario, the colleague had said that he trusts the colleague to return the money, right? So something like this won't fall under national security and humanitarian concerns, right? Second case study kya hai? PYQ case study. Tax officer dealing with financial irregularities by a doctor setting up charitable trust, right? So doctor is doing some good work, charitable trust वो सेटअप कर रहे हैं, but there are financial irregularities involved. So these two scenarios will come under procedural compliance versus compassion. इसमें इतना बड़ा national security या legal duty का question नहीं आ रहा है, ठीक है? Scenario 4, again everybody is familiar with this scenario where meritocracy, impartiality versus favoritism का case है. अब बहुत सारे PYQs इस सिनेरियो से रिलेटेड भी आए हुए हैं. वी हैव प्रोक्योरमेंट कॉन्ट्रैक्ट रिलेटेड, प्रोक्योरमेंट कॉन्ट्रैक्ट्स हैं, इनके अलॉटमेंट को लेके है, राइट? देन यू हैव पॉलिसी ऑफिसर to a builder. Appointments related. Right. So in all these case studies, जो scenario 4 को correspond कर रहे हैं, you can see that meritocracy is being compromised, right? यहाँ पे nepotism हो रहा है, favoritism हो रहा है, right? Nepotism भी हम लिख सकते हैं. यहाँ पे स्लैश करके nepotism. With me so far? Perfect. Now you have business sustainability, economic gains versus fair competition. Right. Before we go to scenario number 5, scenario number 4, 5, 6. ये corporates and workplace से ज्यादा relate करते हैं, right? So be mindful of that. Scenario number 5, business sustainability, economic gains versus fair competition. Decent number of questions have come from this as well. Now if we contrast scenario 5 with scenario 4, in scenario 5, you are sitting on this side of the table. अब आप बिजनेस को रिप्रेजेंट कर रहे हैं एंड यू हैव टू विन अ कॉन्ट्रैक्ट, राइट? इस सिनेरियो में यू हैव बिजनेस सस्टेनेबिलिटी, इकोनॉमिक गेन्स वर्सेस फेयर कंपटीशन का, बिकॉज यू हैव बीन आस्क्ड टू पे अ ब्राइब, यू हैव टू यूज अनफेयर मींस, एंड हेंस दिस डिलेमा कम्स अप, राइट? CEO facing pressure to pay bribe, right? CEO has to pay bribe. Private company faces coercive demands from political group. Private company को political pressure face करना पड़ रहा है, right? This comes under business sustainability का question हो जाता है, because you need the contract, you need the profits arising out of those contracts, you need that business, right? But at the same time, fair competition is something that we all should adhere to, right? Scenario 6, human dignity, employee well-being versus organizational performance. You have PYQs here. Architect facing harassment from senior. And second, addressing harassment and inappropriate conduct by a star marketing head. So inappropriate conduct by star marketing head. The primary dilemma here becomes human dignity, employee well-being versus organizational performance, because you don't want to let that senior executive go. So it makes economic sense for the company to retain the high-performing employee, right? Scenario 7, public interest slash safety versus vested interest slash regulatory corruption. Right? Somewhat similar to meritocracy and impartiality. Right? ये भी इसके PYQs देखते हैं. Right? NGO faces red tapeism and bribery, demands to start a school. Right? So NGO wanted to start a school. So you can say that its public interest is being hampered. Acha, we have a lot more scenarios here. Corrupt land allotment. Land allotment, right? Illegal construction. 3 हो गया, illegal construction. Public safety का question आ जाता है when you have illegal construction or you have a building collapse. And these two dilemmas sort of become primary, secondary, depending on the scenario. इनके बीच में काफी correlation है, right? Let's look at scenario number 8 now. You have compromised integrity versus career risk. Anything again exposing corruption. Right. Ab scenario 8 and scenario 7 में the difference is that in scenario 7 there'll be a question around public interest explicitly, right? वहां पे अब जैसे स्कूल बनाने नहीं दे रहे हैं, right? लैंड एलोकेशन में इशू है, इलीगल कंस्ट्रक्शन है, पब्लिक एट लार्ज इज बीइंग इंपैक्टेड, सो यू हैव पब्लिक इंटरेस्ट हियर, राइट? कॉम्प्रोमाइज इंटेग्रिटी वर्सेस करियर रिस्क, दिस इज जनरल करप्शन की बात हो रही है, राइट? इसमें पब्लिक का इन्वॉल्वमेंट नहीं है इतना ज्यादा. Let's come to scenario 9, law enforcement versus neutrality. This is similar to all the other scenarios that we have done, right? Scenario 10 is organizational loyalty versus public interest, confidentiality versus whistleblowing. This scenario specifically corresponds to whistleblowing. Whistleblower related ethical issues, हम डीप में नहीं जाएंगे. आपको एक लाइन में बता दूं, you are a part of the organization and you see some wrongdoing happening, right? And now the dilemma is what's mentioned here, org loyalty versus public interest. So if that organization is the government, then some issue around public interest could be there, right? केस स्टडी देखते हैं. केस स्टडी आई थिंक स्नोडन से रिलेटेड केस स्टडी थी, राइट? वेयर ही सॉर्ट ऑफ एक्सपोज्ड ऑल द सर्वेलेंस सिस्टम्स दैट द गवर्नमेंट वाज यूजिंग, राइट? ही एक्सपोज्ड ऑल ऑफ दैट एंड देन ही सॉर्ट ऑफ वाज ब्रांडेड अ क्रिमिनल, राइट? So the question here is of organizational loyalty and public interest. Second is confidentiality versus whistleblowing, right? कि आप जो information out there in the public कर रहे हैं, that's supposed to stay confidential, right? The third dilemma here becomes national security related. अगर आपके पास कुछ national secrets हैं that could harm the nation, but you feel that the public at large should also know, right? So national security concern would come in there as well, right? 11th scenario is around resource allocation, right? Resource allocation में हम क्या देखते हैं? It's again a very common case study that you get to see. Hospital administrator है, hospital admin, and shortage of resources है. तो आप क्या करोगे, कैसे मैनेज करोगे? ठीक है. एलोकेटिंग फंड्स, टू SEZ versus special economic zone versus housing for poor. All these case studies have been asked in the exam, right? ये PYQs हैं. आप देख सकते होंगे एक एक पेज के PYQs हम एक लाइन में फटाफट से टच करके जा रहे हैं. दिस शुड टेल यू दैट केस स्टडी आपको पूरा पेज वर्ड बाय वर्ड 2 बार 3 बार नहीं पढ़ना है. ठीक है, यू हैव टू बी वेरी क्विक इन रीडिंग योर केस स्टडीज. सिनेरियो 12 इज प्रोफेशनल कमिटमेंट वर्सेस फैमिली ऑब्लिगेशन, पर्सनल प्रायोरिटीज. इनके अराउंड भी क्वेश्चंस आए हुए हैं. सो फर्स्ट, जॉइंट सेक्रेटरी स्ट्रगल्स विद जॉब डिमांड्स एंड नेग्लेक्टेड फैमिली लाइफ, राइट? Quite a long while. This was around a women officer, right? So the case study was pretty real in the sense that the fact that women have to, do twice the work that men do to prove themselves. It was around that. So there was a lot of scope here for you to pack in emotions and present a very sensitive side. Scenario 13, 14, 15 correspond to special groups, right? 13 is child rights, 14 is gender equality, 15 is social prejudice. इनके फटाफट से देख लेते हैं. Illegal employment of minors in hazardous units, right? Minors in hazardous units. Child labor related ही है. There have been a couple of stories. Right. Gender equality versus cultural conservatism में you have girls' education and traditional elders. Girls' education, but traditional elders resist कर रहे हैं. Social prejudice versus inclusivity. What do we have here? Caste discrimination affecting a midday meal scheme. Right. So, in these scenarios, try to be specific, try to use technical terms, formal terms. Scenario 16, 17, 18 are profession related. राइट, साइंटिफिक इंटेग्रिटी आ जा रहा है, जर्नलिस्टिक इंटेग्रिटी आ रहा है, पेशेंट राइट्स आ रहा है, सिमिलरली कंज्यूमर राइट्स हो गए. If you have a professional setting that corresponds to these professions and it's not a general case study, then use these technical terms, right? इनके भी PYQs हैं. A scientist pressure to fast track drug trials unethically, right? ये drug trials related, right? इसमें secondary, in this case, you can list public interest as your secondary dilemma, right? Public interest versus vested interests, right? Journalistic integrity versus career advancement. News suppress करने को journalist को बोला है जो, right? A journalist faces pressure to suppress a story exposing corruption, right? Okay. What do we have? 19 and 20th. Public duty versus personal safety. डेंजरस इन्वायरमेंट में है जहां आपको लॉ इन्फोर्समेंट के साथ डील करना है, वहां योर पर्सनल सेफ्टी इज ऑल्सो बीइंग क्वेश्चन, राइट? इन सच सिनेरियोज यू हैव टू इंश्योर दैट you go with a backup, you go with full force, you don't go head on. आप individually, आप अकेले माफिया के साथ डील करने नहीं जा रहे हैं, right? 20th is personal dignity versus restraint in public life. This is related to social media posting, right? So with this, we come to the end of this session. And again, I would like to reiterate, the framework here is not to memorize 100 ethical dilemmas. It is to understand that you have close to 20 scenarios and a mix and match of these scenarios happen, right? So in the environment protection versus economic development, there could be corruption or contract allocations happening. So this scenario will get combined with meritocracy, impartiality one, right? And you have to now combine these dilemmas. The important points here that you need to note is around identifying protagonist and the primary dilemma, using the most appropriate terms to define the primary dilemma. And then for the secondary dilemma, using all the other dilemmas that you already know. If you are doing this much, you are more than comfortable with respect to case studies. For discussions around how to resolve these dilemmas, join our Telegram group where exceptionally rich conversations are happening. Thank you.